Good morning, everybody. So, when I was speaking with the Hack team this year, and we were talking about making a panel, we decided we'll do a panel about food as medicine. And then they told me, okay, who can we bring as speakers? So I told them I have a really interesting crowd of speakers I want to bring. And we started tracking from the end of last year these 4 rock stars we have here that we think bring a really interesting perspective on this topic. Now, those that know me for a while have been talking about food as medicine for a long time. I'm very passionate about this vertical and territory. I think, if we look at the data, and everybody's familiar with it, in the US alone, they spend around $2 trillion a year on food-related healthcare issues. The number one cause of mortality at the end is linked to food. But still, we see very little initiatives in this space. And I think food as medicine has been a topic that has been discussed in the industry for the last few years, shows a lot up in some of the trend reports, but we don't see yet enough activity. I think a lot of us start to have the thesis that now is the time, that we're going to see some interesting companies and evolution happening, both from an R&D and a regulatory framework. And that's what we wanted really to talk about today. So I think what we'll start with is each of the speakers would introduce themselves. And if you can each also just say a few words about what does food as medicine mean for you personally.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Anand, Parikh, CEO, co-founder of Fythe Therapeutics. Fythe is a company that develops precision nutrition as the 4th pillar of cancer care, alongside surgery, radiotherapy, and traditional therapeutics. Background is started a company valued at about $2 billion today that used a ketogenic diet to treat diabetes. So it was very successful there and then moved into cancer. What is food as medicine to me? I'll probably harp on this theme throughout the course of today, but I think it depends on what level of data you have. What's the quality of your data determines what is food. Is it a foodstuff? Is it a medical food? Is it a therapeutic? It depends on the quality of the data. And that's how I would think about it.
Thank you. So my name is Nora Khaldi. I'm the CEO and founder of Neuritas. What we do is we use AI to discover new molecules called peptides to improve human health. So we make ingredient technologies that can be added to various products and improve human health. My background is pure mathematics, computer science. I worked in drug discovery initially and then went into the area of nutrition. And for me, food as medicine stems from the understanding. I saw shocking statistics recently where they showed, okay, the food industry is a 10 trillion industry, causing a 6.6 trillion health issue. And that's massive. That is like crazy that this industry is causing so many health problems. And it comes down to the ingredients that we're using within these products. So how can we improve these ingredients? How can we make them healthier? And this is now possible through technologies like the one we have, where we create new ingredients to improve human health. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Richard Day. I am the VP for Medical Affairs at ADM. ADM is one of the world's largest food and nutrition companies, and me and my team are responsible for a pretty extensive clinical research program, a lot of which is focused on the microbiome. Prior to joining ADM, I was a hospital-based psychiatrist, so I hope that working in the food industry and also being a doctor at least partially qualifies me for this panel today. What is food as medicine? Well, literally all of the research we do is on the role of food and the microbiome in health. And really, the microbiome is now seen as a cornerstone of overall health and well-being. So for me, food fundamentally is medicine.
Cool. My name is Adam Melonas. I'm very different than this group, no PhD. High school dropout. I'm a chef. Actually, I say I'm a recovering chef. A recovering chef, an irritated innovator, and a hustler, basically. I've got 3 companies. I've got a company called Chew, food and beverage innovation company, a company called Fast Food, cliche billboard here, in the sports performance space, and another company called Luminous, So for me, food is medicine. Frankly, I think through cause and effect, I think if all food is either medicine, it's either going to heal you or harm you. More often than not, it depends on dosage, like most things in life. So yeah, that's kind of my position.
Thank you. And Adam, obviously with your role in Chew, you work with some of the leading companies in the world. We worked a lot together when I was in Mondelez, and you have a fantastic kind of list of big companies and smaller companies working with you in the industry. What are you seeing now at the moment are some of the kind of hot topics that some of the larger companies or the emerging startups in the space are trying to tackle?
Yeah, look, I think most of this stuff is cyclical, right? And I think typically it's mostly being led by consumers. It's not a surprise that typically big companies, little companies, medium-sized companies will do whatever consumers want, right? I think we've seen it exaggerated in this plant-based meat analog space. I think, frankly, I'm that irritating guy where at all those different expos and shows, etc., I will go to each and every one of those stands and I will ask those founders, like, why did you do that thing? And frankly, more often than not, when you keep on asking why enough times, you eventually get to, well, shit, I saw an opportunity, everybody's doing it, I want my piece. And you ask the question, what's different about this product? And they don't really know. So if you think about somewhere the tail wags the dog here, right? The little companies do it, the medium companies jump on board, then the big companies, all due respect to big companies, but they'll jump on board, a few years later when it's borderline irrelevant. And so, I think all this stuff is cyclical. I think everybody wants to get involved in, custom nutrition. Everybody's different, this and that, but then you have a really hard time scaling it. So I think ultimately everything continues to move forward. I don't think it's exaggerated as it is in small companies, but I think these, smaller, medium-sized changes year after year, eventually, if you look at the food system, it went really bad during the Industrial Revolution. And then I think it's starting to somewhere rebound to something that resembles, if we stretch our imagination, food. But again, I don't think it's as dramatic or as exaggerated as small companies.
Thank you. And just building off to this, Anand, when I heard the first time about Faith, I think it was around, a year and a half ago or two, when I think you came with your first, announcement of one of the fundraising rounds. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but just reading and saying, there's a company that is kind of trying to tackle cancer with this fourth pillar, nutrition, seemed to me like, how did nobody else even work on this for years? And one of the questions I was also trying to figure out is, even you as a founder building this company, are you building, are you positioning yourself as a food tech company that is kind of going more clinical, or are you actually a pharma company that is, that just the mean of consumption, instead of eating a pill or a powder, is actually the form factor is food? How do you view the company?
Yeah, to give a total non-answer, it's both. But
it's always the best answer.
Yeah, that's right. If it was one of those two, it's the latter. We're a pharma company where the treatment modality happens to be food. We're no different than Moderna or any other company that uses a new vector of delivery, whether it's mRNA or whatever it is, we use food. Now, I think what's interesting is, I'm not a food person, I'm a healthcare person. I know no one in this conference. See everyone oh, hello, old friend, how are you? I know no one. So come say hi to me because I'm lonely. But it's the truth, right? I come from the healthcare side. And what's interesting about what Adam just said was Adam's points were all about how can we make something more appealing or nutritious or customized for the consumer. From my world, the consumer is important, but the consumer is not your first customer. The regulator is your first customer. The insurance, whoever's paying for it, in the US, whether it's the commercial insurers here, whether it's the national insurers, those are your customers. And you have to convince them first of all. And the level of data that it takes to convince those folks, quite frankly, I have not seen the food industry generate. Like when I see the food as medicine interventions, and I read the papers and in many places, I laugh. I see like N of 20, single arm studies, no randomization, no statistical significance, no thinking about effect size. And I'm like, no clinician is ever gonna look at this and prescribe this. Asking an endocrinologist to get behind something where it's like, yeah, here's some mouse studies, maybe there's 20-person human studies, like it's laughable. It's genuinely laughable. And so you have to think about this if you wanna get pharmaceutical level reimbursement and you wanna get pharmaceutical level margins, which I'm sure a lot of the big boys like Mondelez are looking at and saying, I'm tired of my 20-30% gross margin business and I want to go upstream. Well, you got to put on your big boy, big girl pants, raise the money, do the clinical trials that really prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is having an impact that's akin to a therapeutic.
And building off of this, just for Richard, because this is a really interesting point, kind of representing now the big co. It's so fun not to be the guy representing big co. So I'm going to put the pressure on you a bit, Richard, now, is there is a thesis or people claim that what we're going to start seeing is, to Anand's point, food companies getting tired of the 30, best case, 40% margin, and trying to go up a level, get closer to these kind of higher margin businesses. And, we see a good example, for example, could be Nestle, right? With Nestle, and we know there's a Nestle division, Nestle Health, doesn't matter if it's successful or not. And then on the other side, there's a claim that we're starting to see some pharma companies wanting to have bigger mainstream businesses with brands and trying to kind of leverage their know-how to kind of go down into the functional food space. Do you believe that that's something we're starting to see? Like, where are you on this path with ADM?
So maybe I'll just start by addressing one of Anand's points. And I'm also going to give a non-answer, which is, sometimes the food industry is guilty of putting forward poorly designed, underpowered studies that deliver negligible or no statistically significant, let alone clinically relevant results. However, we also do some really good work as well, and I would suggest that you're not necessarily looking in the right places. There's been a real shift recently, and I think maybe if we look historically, there was this line in the sand, and you had pharma on one side and food on the other, and the money that was invested on the pharma side dwarfed that was invested on the food side, and we were dealing with foods. You don't expect to see the needle move to the same extent as you would with a pharmacological agent. However, to Gil's point, what we're seeing now is actually some of the pharma companies, or more specifically, the live biotherapeutic industry. So this is the bugs as drugs. There's a huge number of companies that are looking to turn microbiome products into pharmaceuticals. But what's happened for some of them is they haven't got the results they expected. So we're seeing that these pharma companies are now entering the functional food space or the dietary supplement space. And then the exact opposite is true, because you've got companies, your example was Nestle, I would say ADM. We're investing large amounts of money, a huge amount of resources, and we're working with super reputable academic institutions. Last year, we published a very nice paper with the University of Oxford. This year, we're publishing a similar paper with King's College London that show really interesting, clinically meaningful results. So here we have the food industry moving up that value chain. And what was previously a line in the sand really is now a gray zone in the middle. And the people that benefit actually are the consumers, because there's more choice, better results, and better research happening.
And Richard, you're a psychiatrist.
I am.
Okay. Do you believe we're going to start seeing food play a role, or kind of we've all heard in kind of the more consumer speak, like, mood food. But let's take this more to a mental food. Do you believe we're going to start seeing similar like we're seeing here about cancer? Or we're going to see more clinical trials, more validated foods, nutritional supplements, ingredients that are actually going to be part of the battle with, depression, which is such a big topic in humanity?
I mean, the short answer is yes, but maybe the bigger and expanded one would be to, well, first off, think what is it we're talking about when we say mental health, because it's more than depression. We're talking about this vast spectrum of diagnoses, from neurodegenerative disorders, mood disorders, anxiety, phobias, cognitive impairment, and that affects hundreds of millions of people across the globe, and it affects them on a spectrum. So I don't think anyone in their right mind could ever say that the role of pharmacological interventions is going to disappear. Severe and enduring mental illness will always need to be treated with pharmacological agents. But if I were to look at psychiatry as a profession, it's changed so much over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Historically, psychiatry was about detention and medication. But then in the last 20 or 30 years, this second pillar of mental health care provision has emerged. And now, my experience is from the UK, but this is mirrored in Europe and North America, you will not see a psychiatrist only prescribe drugs. You always prescribe talking therapy or a psychological intervention alongside. So in the same way as Anand, you were talking about the emerging pillars of cancer care, we have these emerging pillars of mental health care provision. And I would argue that the evidence now points towards a third pillar, which is nutrition. So nutritional psychiatry is an emerging field, looking at how food, nutrition, and the microbiome plays a part in mental health. And that's what me and my team are working on. We look at how the microbiome affects mental health, and we're going to be publishing a really cool paper in a couple of weeks, which shows how actually a particular consortia of bacteria interacts with prescribed antidepressants. So it's not that nutritional supplements or nutritional interventions necessarily as a standalone will be the future, but they will be incorporated into the current standard of care, which is pharmacological and psychological, but with this emerging nutritional pillar as a third option.
Adam has something to say, and let's move quick. Adam,
Yeah,
continue.
no,
I want to move away from depression because people are getting depressed, and I want to talk about something happy in a second. So
No,
Adam,
just-
but say something happy,
It's
please.
going to be a super quick one. So I think, we've used food to chastise ourselves for decades, right? Probably forever, right? You eat a piece of chocolate, you punish yourself. And I think, one of the really interesting facts that we've found within the consumer goods industry is candy consumption. And a staggering statistic of candy consumption is that 90% of candy is consumed by yourself, right? Typically by yourself because you don't want to show everybody that you're eating this candy product. And that changes according to the price that you pay. So if it's Godiva chocolate, for example, you pull it out, you offer that at the dinner party. But if it's let's say a Mars product, not to upset
Milka bar.
What's that?
Milka bar.
Milka bar. If it's a Milka bar, you're crushing that thing by yourself, and then you're punishing yourself for the rest of the day. So I think from a mental health perspective, the less we focus on the micro and the more we focus on the macro, it's also going to affect positively mental health as well.
Cool. Okay, we're moving to Nora, and we're moving from depression to happy things. Nora, before we go into scientific stuff, I've known you for some years, and I had one question that I never asked you, but I have to ask it now. How did you get Bono and The Edge to be your first investors? I don't know if you guys know, Nora is Irish. Her first investors are Bono. I love U2, by the way. I don't know, anybody likes U2 here in the audience? Okay, that's good. A lot of U2 fans.
A lot of
So
fans.
somehow, I don't know, did they ever even understand what you guys do? No.
It's funny. No, they do.
They do?
Oh my God.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So Edge is.
Do they make decisions quickly?
They make decisions quickly.
Are they still betting? Are they looking
they're-
to other startups to invest in? Or no?
They're basically, they're business individuals. They understand business. They've invested heavily and have succeeded in doing so. And Edge is very, he would have been an AI expert if he wasn't a guitarist. So literally, so they do understand very, very well, and they see this industry as an industry that's prime for change and innovation and need for innovation and solutions. And they saw what we're doing as something that was going to solve a lot of this. Hence the support and continued support.
Okay. So if any of the entrepreneurs here, I know it's tough days, hard to fundraise. Anybody wants tips on Bono the Edge, go to Nora later. I'm sure you're going to share their numbers. But Nora, let's jump into Nuritas. We talked a bit about pharma and food. You've been dabbling a bit in the world of food and supplements. I've always felt that supplements are a really interesting segment, but I always felt that also supplements as a segment suffered historically, mainly in the US for many years, and still do, from this perception of a bit of a snake oil. Like, it's a kind of not that regulated. Everybody's claiming, eat this and you're going to fly. And people don't take so seriously the category. How have you addressed, and like, where are you positioning some of the basically functional ingredients coming from your work, and how are you viewing the supplement category?
So we came into this area knowing this, and the goal was to bring pharma-like approaches, and a lot of what Richard was saying resonates totally with what we're doing to this area. So, it really comes down to the clinicals you do. So if you want to develop something in whatever area you're going after in consumer, you really need to have very strong clinicals backing your ingredient and the efficacy of your ingredients. Double-blind placebo clinicals like pharma would do on an efficacy base. So you're looking at a pharmaceutical clinical, but taking a nutritional supplement. So for example, we developed one called PeptiStrong, which is in the muscle area. We started off with the technology always starts off with a consumer need. So the consumer need in this case was muscle health in general. We translated that into a biological question: what does muscle health actually mean? And that actually translated into 3 different molecular pathways in the human body. We want to produce more protein, we want to reduce the breakdown of protein, and we want to reduce inflammation of the muscle. So those 3 pathways were ones we wanted to modulate. And we knew exactly what targets within those we wanted to modulate. And then we used our AI system to discover peptides from various sources. So we were looking at we're constantly collecting sources from around the world, plant sources, also marine sources. And through AI, we're trying to identify peptides. These are short proteins that would actually function that way, that would reduce the breakdown of protein, improve protein production, etc. And we discovered 3 peptides in fava bean. Now, when you eat the fava bean, you absolutely don't get the benefit because your body breaks it down randomly. And there are actually trials testing fava bean protein, and they showed nothing. But once you unlock, so what we do is identify the peptides that are dormant within the fava bean. We unlock them through a process that we call hydrolysis, an enzymatic hydrolysis, and then the activity actually appears. And then we do many laboratory testing, so in vitro into in vivo, and then we go into clinical. With this specifically, we did 2 double-blind placebo efficacy clinicals, one of which we went head-to-head with the standard of care today, which basically is animal protein. So a lot of animal protein is given in hospitals, in bed rest when you're losing muscle, or in sports nutrition, etc. And plant-based has never been better than animal-based. And we went head-to-head, and what we show is that we're 4 times better from a plant-based perspective. These are peptides specifically acting on those pathways, at producing more protein and more muscle in versus the standard of care today. And then we went and further developed other trials where we're showing a lot more power. So strength coming through from muscle, reduced inflammation, et cetera, and all these studies have been published in peer-reviewed publications as well. So so this one now is on the market, and really the differentiation here is all about clinicals. Everything we do goes through at least 2 to 3 human trials, and we spend a lot of our investment towards doing all these trials. We've launched 2 ingredients so far, and there are many behind from we have one coming through in sleep, we have one coming through in glucose modulation. Again, all these going through large clinicals with professors globally, double-blind placebo, etc. And I think that's the biggest difference you bring, is that differentiation from a clinical perspective. The other thing as well that I need to say is that, you know, technology in parallel has grown. So you have all these wearables that can measure. So you can't lie anymore, especially in the future. People will know when they're using something if it's working or not via a lot of these technologies. So what we've done in our trials over the past while, we've integrated wearables with them. So now you can actually measure the difference. And that's very, very important, because that's the way forward. So all the snake oil in the future is not going to last. Things are efficacious, that are healthy and natural. I think that combination of both is what we're trying to do. And you can't lie, through clinicals supported by peer-reviewed publications and wearables as well.
Great, thank you. And Adam, you founded recently fast food. Since you became like a crazy triathlete and Ironman, you decided that, I understand, you couldn't find anything on the market that took care of what you needed. Is fast food positioned as a brand in the supplement aisle, or
No.
is it snake oil?
Most definitely not. No, look, I think, I think most decisions in my life were born out of irritation. Irritation is that one thing that moves me to do the stupid thing, which is start companies. And so in this particular case, like most stories, if you can't find that, or you're irritated with what's available, like most people do, they go to their scientists and their chefs. I formed a team of them and said, selfishly, give me something that fuels me without any artificial ingredients at top performance of the market. And for me, we didn't go through the double-blind studies and things like that. I think it's more anecdotal. We developed it for a year, and we spent the last year and a half testing with world champions, top pros in a lot of different sports, Olympians, gold medalists, etc. And they'll tell you the brutal, honest truth. And I think that's always the advice I give to anybody starting companies, is go and find a group of people, the largest group of people who don't give a shit for your feelings, who will give you the hard, honest truth. And we did enough of that. So that's our version of a double-blind study. People who don't care how we feel, they're just going to give us the honest truth.
Great. We just have a few more minutes, and I think we would like to open it to the audience to questions. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. Yeah, there's somebody there. There's here. Do you guys need a microphone?
Hey, there is a price difference between what you can get for pharma and for food. So I'm wondering whether you're able to generate sufficient margin to pay for the clinical trials.
I can take quickly that one, and I can pass it. In our case, yes. So the goal with the technology initially, because when you look at the area of whether it's dietary supplement, food, et cetera, lower margins than the pharmaceutical area, yes. And the goal with the technology was, can we invent ingredients faster? Because in this area, the area of food in general is not made to make new ingredients. They're made to use what already exists. So can we make ingredients faster, take them to the market faster, address consumers' need, as opposed to, for example, retrofitting what exists into a consumer need? You actually start with a consumer need and you solve it. So that was a big thing. And actually reducing costs. So because the cycles are short, so when we discover through AI, we discover it takes us a few months to discover a molecule, and then we can actually go into clinical because of the plant nature of it. So with the fava bean, for example, we went into clinical directly, and these are efficacy clinical. So we can shorten the cycle from discovery to end, making the ingredients cost effective for the market. So the margins are pretty healthy and yet fit the model, the industry model as well. Yeah.
What I've also found, the way I think about it, is that there's price, there's regulatory, and there's the quality of clinical data. And if you think about that sort of 3x3 matrix. On one end, you have supplements where the price you can get is relatively low. The regulatory oversight is relatively light, and the quality of the data can differ, right? Then you get medical foods, where again, regulatory oversight is sort of moderate. There's some labeling stuff. Quality of the data, again, moderate. The FDA is not overseeing it. And then price is okay. Margins are okay. Probably better than food, but not quite as good as pharma. Think about Abbott as a company that plays in this space, Mead Johnson, these kinds of companies. And then on the right, all the way to the right, you have the pharma side. And there, the reimbursement is the highest. So for example, our lead program is in PI3 kinase mutated breast cancer. If we get approved, we will probably charge on the order of $200,000 a year per patient per year. But it'll take us 5 years to get approved. We'll probably spend $200 million in clinical trials, and we'll have to get regulatory approval from a variety of government agencies in years-long trials. So there's just a matrix there. And it's not to say that things in those other categories can't be of an equally high quality, but the data bar is much higher the further along you go.
So, sorry, just a related point actually to Nora's. It's when we're dealing with foods, there is an inherent safety already embedded within the product, which is what makes part of that development process much faster. So you need fewer steps to get to the market because, for example, with Anand's work, it would have required those early stages to demonstrate safety.
One comment I would make to that is, for example, you gave the example of psychiatry, where talking about pairing food with psychiatric products, and it's really important. That type of combination therapy is very important, but you need to make sure that it is safe. So food is inherently safe when taken by itself, but you have no idea what a ketogenic diet might do to a schizophrenic that's on Abilify. So you need to do those trials together to make sure that you don't have drug-food interaction in the same way that you would do it with a drug. So like we have seen in our trials, for example, that serine, glycine, proline depletion, these are just amino acids, but depletion of serine, glycine, proline in pancreatic cancer patients actually increases, my board wouldn't love me saying this in a public forum, but it actually increases rates of grade 3 and grade 4 diarrhea, which is something important that's going to be noted on Gemabraxane, when we get to combination therapy steps with those drugs.
Just to be clear, all clinical trials that are conducted on foodstuffs include aspects of safety in their design. That.
Okay, thank you. I totally agree on all the different aspects of the complex metrics talking about food as medicine. But, there's people who eat to live, and then there's those who live to eat, right? And I I would love to hear some comments about the pleasure of eating or flavor, deliciousness, because I think no matter how functional a food is, it all comes down to if it doesn't have deliciousness or taste good, people are not going to take it down the shelf the second time. So I know you said you didn't want to talk about consumers, but I'm curious to hear some comments about that.
So maybe I might be one of the most qualified here to talk about taste. I spent the first part of my career only in very, very high-end restaurants. So taste is absolutely paramount, right? And I think, and I would also challenge, there's a portion of the population that frankly don't give a shit, right? I would say, generally speaking, the top 15% of any population, if you tell them that thing is going to make you live 10 years longer, but you've got to hold your nose to eat it because it's disgusting, they're going to consume it over and over and over again. They're going to tell their friends, they're going to recruit people to their tribe. I will tell you the bottom 85% of the population don't care if it makes them live 10 years longer. If it doesn't taste great, they don't go back, right? So I think there's a difference between trial and repeat, right? Trial, you're going to get a lot of trial based off function. you're going to get repeat based off taste. So if it doesn't taste great, then doesn't matter what it's going to do, people aren't going to keep on going back to it.
Actually, on that, it was interesting because when we were creating our ingredients initially, we had to, because there's one thing to say we want efficacy, biological efficacy, but there's another thing to say, okay, it has to be commercially viable. And commercial viability means taste, it means it has to be stable within formulation, it has to be stable within baking goods, so it has to resist heat. And actually, we had to build, from at the beginning, we weren't really aware of that. This is going back at the beginnings of Neuritas. So we had to build predictors, AI predictors, to predict not only for efficacy, but predict for stability within hot things, because obviously our ingredients are not just in the supplement world, they're in the food world, medical food, etc. And they need to be baked sometimes. So they need to resist heat, but they need to be neutral in taste. So they need to be orally available because they have to be given orally. And all those we had to build predictors for and integrate them at the very beginning when we're discovery at phase. We discover not only for the biological function, but for all the other factors that make a product successful or not. So it's true.
I've got a good story about this. We actually fucked this up horribly because this is not our background. We're scientists, right? And so we fucked this up horribly and actually had patients telling us this food is disgusting, we can't eat it. And we hired Adam's firm to help us. So yeah, it's really important. It's really, really important. And yeah, don't do what we did.
So guys, we have to wrap up, but thank you. I learned a lot personally, hopefully you guys as well. Special thanks to Adam, Richard, Nora, and Anand. Actually, most of them flew from very far away. A lot of them gave up amazing conferences of their LPs and investors, and others have been traveling around the world and just coming this morning. So really appreciate it. Some of them had to give up some training for Ironman. So really appreciate you guys taking the time coming and you guys joining us. And thank you. Let's go and enjoy the rest of the day.